I'm your host, Soraya Sinozie, and this is Diaspora and Development, where we give voice to people of the diaspora working in international development. My guest today is Bashair Ahmed, CEO of Shabaka, a diaspora-led organization focused on the role of diaspora and migrants in humanitarian preparedness, response, and recovery. Bashair holds a doctorate in migration from the University of Sussex, where she is also a research associate. Bashair has over 20 years of experience working with United Nations agencies and international organizations focused on fragile and conflict-affected countries. Bashair has consulted on a wide range of migration and diaspora initiatives, including the protection of irregular migrants, development of e-training on humanitarian principles for diaspora organizations, and providing guidance on diaspora engagement and development and humanitarian response. Thank you for joining me, Bashair. Let's get into it. Can you start off by telling us about your career trajectory? What led you to the humanitarian field?
I think a lot of people tell you some of the career trajectories has been by accident. Mine, to some extent, has been by design, just by the virtue of my country of heritage from Sudan. And I came with a wave of that in the 1990s, as a child out of my family to the UK and went to school in the UK and such. And when I came to university, I knew I needed to do something to do with international development, working with the United Nations or similar entities. To my parents' disappointment, I think they wanted me to do medical engineering or something like that. So when I said I'm gonna do that,
of all of the immigrant children I had spoken to, my parents are a doctor, et cetera. Trust me, when I went into political science, it was like, oh, interesting.
So yeah, it was an interesting battle. So the battles started much earlier. Went into university, did my master's, and then I started actually working. I was very lucky. I think it was just a timing, like the 2000s, in terms of some of the opportunities that I had. So I worked with a local organization where I grew up in Brighton, in the UK, and then worked with an entity, a Sunnis across Sudan organization against torture. So that was really an eye-opening in terms of the trauma of the human rights violations and such in Sudan, and then went on to work with, and quite quickly, and I was very lucky, I had a lot of, was able to get support, but also advice. So I worked with entities such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and went on. So that was very much kind of my focus in human rights, but I felt I just deal with putting the plaster on the cut, really. And you really needed to look at a bit more detail. What does it look like? I tried to go back to work on the continent, and that was really challenging. So I was based in Uganda briefly with some of the local organizations, and then got the opportunity to work also with the UN in Ethiopia. So it was really interesting to see how the UN operates, and went on to also kind of work with the kind of like more humanitarian sector, so with such as the Norwegian Refugee Council. In many ways, I was also privileged because I was able to work in different contexts. So I was working in Pakistan, I was working with the UN Office for Humanitarian Affairs based in UAE. So I went around to a lot of things.
It's interesting that you said, I didn't mean to cut you off. It was something interesting. You said that it's hard to work in the continent. Can you tell us a little bit why it was hard to work in the continent?
I think because sometimes you want to be boxed in. So it's kind of like you're either diaspora or like the other person. So you're always kind of outsider. So you don't really completely fit in. And I think this is diaspora. Once you leave your origin countries or grow up somewhere, you actually have a bit more multiplicity. So you don't really fit neatly anywhere. So that obviously I was an Ugandan. I was black, but not quite black enough. I was not white but yeah, exactly. So it was
consistently othered. Yes, I know that as a diaspora, consistently othered.
Yeah, even in Ethiopia, even though most people assumed I was Ethiopian, but we don't speak some of the languages in Ethiopia, the Amharic and stuff. I could do a little bit of it. Again, I was kind of like, I remember in a restaurant, this lady was like insistent. She thought I was Ethiopian diaspora second gen who just did not speak the language. And she was insistent, like, to speak to me in Amharic. And I'm like, I don't speak the language. And I actually had to stop. I was like, listen, I don't speak the language, not just because I'm not Ethiopian. I did not grow up with that language at home.
It's interesting because that happened to me one time in Tanzania. I was in the airport. This man was talking to me and I said, I don't know. And he repeated it. I said, I don't know. And he's like, young lady, you need to learn to speak the language of your heritage. And I'm like, but this is not my heritage. He was shocked. He was shocked. So yeah, it's very interesting. I call it a hybrid identity where you fit somewhere, but you don't fit everywhere. It's very difficult. Why, in this context, is diaspora engagement important to the humanitarian response? And why do you think the voice of the diaspora is missing in international development and humanitarian spaces?
I think it came through, just as I mentioned, working with different organizations and different entities. And it was very much of local organizations and internationals, but you had a lot of diaspora I knew from personal experience and from friends from different countries, actually, how they actually engage with origin countries. It was just not documented. I came in a very interesting organizations in the UK who have been now around for about 30 years called African Organization for Development. I do apologize for destroying the acronyms, but they're really being quite instrumental in kind of positioning diaspora voices, but more in the development space. But what was missing was those who were affected by conflicts. Usually it's regarded as politicized or disregarded, and also because of the various sanctions, usually on these are countries of origin. And I just felt this cannot go on in a way. So I have a friend of mine who says if you can't feel, find a space that you need, create it. So this is why Shabaka came to fruition. It actually means network in Arabic, but it's also not Nubian heritage as well. It's the name of a pharaoh.
Cool. Interesting. You said something when you were talking about getting your start, and you talked about trauma. And one of the things I had thought about when I was preparing for this interview was, do you think some people resist from participating because of trauma?
I believe that because it can be quite triggering, especially if it's live. I did do some research about intergenerational trauma because that can drive many to also do something about it, to seek justice. But at the same time, like how we, at the moment, many of us might be avoiding the news actively because it can be quite triggering. It's really upsetting. It's where you avoid certain images on your phone when you get it through WhatsApp or other applications. So it really can be quite triggering. So people do not want to engage with it.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do when you're triggered?
I think you have to kind of be prepared when you kind of work on it on full-time basis. So like taking care of mental health, your well-being, and just having these strategies. So try to do kind of normalize activities as well. You can't always be on 100% in a sprint. You have to take this at the marathon if you really want to change the situation. So I do actively try to avoid the news. I would listen to the example, or I will read it in a particular format or specific times of the day, just not to be triggered. And it's not just about Sudan, but I think it's just injustices we see across the globe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
connections with many places. So what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Haiti, what's happening in Syria, what's happening in all of these have a thread as well. So all of it can do that.
Yeah, one day, I think when there was at the peak of the war in Syria, I wake up to the news. I used to wake up to the news. That's how we wake up in our house. When I woke up to some awful thing, and I said, this is not the way to wake up. I have to switch and, protect my mind. It's not like I don't want to know, but maybe the first thing in the morning was not the best way of knowing this. You started telling us about Shabaka. Tell us about Shabaka. Why did you start the organization, and what do you think you do differently?
So Shabaka I set it up, I was in the middle of my PhD actually, and which looked at activism among second generation diaspora from the Horn, comparing those based in Northern Washington, DC. And I knew there was something needs to be done in a way, looking at how diaspora engaged in humanitarianism. Everyone was looking at diaspora as just with a dollar sign or money signs, like, oh, they send so much remittances. Oh yes, let's go and collect it. It doesn't work that way, but with humanitarianism, it was something else. And that's kind of why it was started. And then just over the years, we built quite a portfolio. It's been now 10 years. So this year is our 10th anniversary. It's been a bumpy and interesting journey, let's put it that way. But it's been also quite important to highlight and just to kind of understand and document. So we do mainly research and advocacy and consulting around diaspora and humanitarianism. So we've been working with a lot of UN, international organizations, also diaspora organizations. And what was important is the identity of the organization. One of the things we noted is a lot of diaspora organizations very much focus on just countries of origin, which is understandable. but we didn't have a thread to connect all these learnings and experiences between the different diasporas. So we've been very privileged or very lucky to be able to work with Haitian organizations, Syrian organizations, and many others across the board, because we realize, yes, there are some unique contexts and specific information and experiences, but there's also a thread that will make it quite stronger. The second part of this is increasingly what we have been seeing is, because everyone's seeing the dollar sign of the diaspora, everyone is wanting to engage with them. It reflects how you deal with local organizations, which is they will get the bigger projects. I'm talking about INGOs or, get the bigger pot and give the crumbs to diasporans who are doing the most of the work. And to see this being replicated again in my career was just like, no, not acceptable. We need to colonize, yes, the whole system. I know everyone is like, trying to make diaspora look like INGOs or like join the cluster systems on all of this, but the whole system is like, it's like a burning house at the moment. So why would you want to jump on that bandwagon? And the second part is there needs to be some serious reform. It's not an equitable relationship. So we very much want to continue to speak truth to power, which is I think, very tough. And it does put you in favorable positions.
And can you tell us a little bit about if you're working on reform or what you think needs to be reformed?
The whole system needs to be reformed in the sense, I know everyone is talking about localization, but this should be the emphasis. It should be the default, not what you aim for. So back in 2016, there was a promise that 25% of humanitarian funding will go directly to local responders, to local groups, but it dropped since that time to 1%. And even in context, I was quite shocked.
1%, you said?
1%.
Wow.
In the context of, you hear about Ukraine with the billions committed to Ukraine, but I think it's 0.01 something percent that actually goes directly to Ukrainian organizations who are well organized and well established. So that tells you a little bit about how defunct the system is. The other element of it is the humanitarian system. I think the resistance to change is they keep beating you with the humanitarian principles. I agree with them, and this is something we abide with. But when you talk about, it's based on humanity, independence, neutrality, all these components. But if you're not upholding them yourselves, why should anyone else uphold it? This is the basic premise. Don't apply the law to everyone else and not to yourself. And it's an ecosystem, because what we're seeing also increasingly is mutual aid groups, local responders who are not necessarily registered, because when you're dealing with conflict situational, like emergency crises, you don't have time to go through official channels to set up a nice, branding and template to do reporting. An example is in Sudan, you have mutual aid groups. One of them is such as the emergency response rooms. They're not registered. They're just volunteers who are abandoned by the humanitarian system for the past year and having to step up and not support.
Yeah. Without support, without financial support. And then when the humanitarian organizations arrive, then they create clusters. And then they want your information for those clusters. But then, it's difficult.
And I would just add the clusters. I think the inception of the idea is great, because you do need coordination, but the way it's operating is not optimal, because you need dedicated staff on a full-time basis. I'm sorry, majority of diaspora mutual aid groups are either responding direct or doing this as a second shift. They're doing this as a side thing. So when you're trying to have meetings in the middle of the day all the time, it's just not feasible.
Let's go to immigration, which is a hot button issue. But in the last decade, there's been increasing backlash and resistance to immigrants in the Western Hemisphere. It seems that the right to protection is no longer guaranteed. And as we face increasing climate and violent conflicts around the world, what do you think attributes that change, and what role can the diaspora play?
I think migration is here to stay, and it will continue to increase, and this needs to be included in any climate change funds and such. In Iraq, the south of Iraq is becoming uninhabitable because of drought and the high temperature. So we actually need to be able to be prepared to do that. The Maldives and similar islands are disappearing before our eyes. I'm not sure the next generation is going to have the opportunity to see it. So we need to be able to include diaspora and other actors, because they are responding, also helping the communities to move. They're the ones who provide also information for those in the move or supporting their movements. So if you have diaspora communities in some of the key capitals in London, in Washington, D.C., in Dubai, engage them. Because what's happening is you're not coordinating with them because there's a lack of respect. But you actually, the whole idea of when you do humanitarian response is you need to engage with everyone around the table. Having them just sort of be in the room from time to time just to tick the box, yes, we need some diaspora, local groups, doesn't cut it. They need to be part of the decision making. I can't be here saying, yes, you have to do A, B, C, and D, but there needs to be that dialogue to be built in going forward.
Thank you. And how do you deal with diaspora hostility? I've been here for a long time. These people are different, bringing conflicts that are in their home country to their new country. What do you think about that? How do you deal with it?
It's not black and white, and it's about community engagement. You have that kind of relationship in any context. Humans are humans end of the day, so you're not be able to rise above it, to engage with all these communities because these conflicts are emerging from something. So by kind of like, oh no, we're not going to engage and leave it, what do you think would happen? So you have to engage with these communities, have peace building initiatives or support these communities. I recall there's an organization that was set up by a group of second generation diaspora Somalis in the UK, saw the conflicts within the communities along what was happening in Somalia. It had enough because it really impacted the image of the community, affected social mobility, really has put a lot of stress in the community. So they decided to set up, covering young people from different communities to support them and to provide that space. So actually utilize this as an opportunity to do peace building. Peace building or building linkages doesn't have to be just in origin country. It can be also with communities as well.
That's a very interesting proposal. I like that idea. I remember when I was younger, growing up with Yugoslavian friends, and then when the conflict happened, all of a sudden seeing these fractures that I had never seen, and I never understood them because I thought, this is not going on here. And I've never thought about, peace building within diaspora communities. It's something that I think people should look into a little bit more. Among its many services, Shabaka provides training on humanitarian principles for diaspora organizations. You've talked about it a little bit, but what are these principles and why is training on these principles essential?
I think just to understand how the humanitarian system works, so I think is quite important. So these principles of neutrality, humanity, independence, these are really important principles to abide with when you're doing any engagement. So you're not just wanting to support. It's like, oh, we have the same religion, so I'm just going to support this group, or we're just from the same ethnic group and I'm only going to support this group. It should be based on the needs and such. So it's just to be also understand how the system operates. So the trainings we've provided is actually in collaboration with many other organizations who work in the sector. So it's not just us independently. We're very much about collaborative work. So it's to have these emphasis. So we have a baseline to work with going forward as well. And it doesn't have to be just on the trainings. I know everyone talks about capacity building. I have to say, I don't like that word at all, and we do not use it. Because it's about knowledge exchange, it's about upskilling, it's training. So training really encompasses this that because international organizations also have a lot to learn as well from the diaspora.
Indeed. Given the state of the world today, have you faith in international organizations to bring about positive and sustainable change?
I think it will be necessary. I think there's a reckoning in the sector. It needs leadership. Everyone has been on survival mode because there's no choice at the moment. You have increasing humanitarian crises. You have less funding. So what do? So this is when innovation needs to come into play. Just doing it the same route as before, because the number of lessons learned documents we've seen on people's shelves doesn't work anymore. So there needs to be systematic change and evolution and to decolonize the whole system, because how it's done is very much based on, we want to help you, we will support you, but not wanting to let go of the reins. So there needs to be leadership within the international system to do so.
So that's safe or?
Well, this is why we need advocacy, because things will not change if we're not being open. It's not just about space, but it's about shifting. It will take time, but it's the only way to do it. There needs to be a shift, because what's going to happen is the humanitarian architecture as it stands just collapse and buckle. They're losing a lot of trust, and issues of ethics, how they operate is really unethical. I think if you speak to every single person in the sector, they will have quite a few stories about unethical processes and all of this. So that tells you something. Everyone knows what the issues are.
It's eye-opening. I worked with Oxfam prior to the Haitian earthquake, and I was very proud of the work. And then something happened quite quickly after the earthquake. And, I was responsible for funding and had to sign my name. And some of the things that people wanted me to sign my name on, I was like, I will not. But I always wonder who buckles under this, who says this is okay. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, because the system is only as strong as the people in it. So when you have a strong ethos and ethics of what's with that, it needs to be combined. But what has happened is our people are so scared of losing funds. It's very capitalist in the sense it's all about growth. No one has an exit plan. You shouldn't be proud of being in a particular locality or organization for 50 years. It's actually shameful. I mean, you failed miserably.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so glad to hear that. I have heard this all my life. Oh, we've been here for 25 years. But I'm like, then you're not doing your job. Your job is to not be needed anymore.
Exactly. And hand over the reins. People assume it's like, oh, they won't do it like us, we'll do it properly. No, they just won't do it like you. Leave it alone.
Well, I've been doing it for years without you, so it's an interesting. In the humanitarian and development field, research seems to rarely inform programs. You do research. So as a researcher, do you think research will lead to better programs?
I'm at two minds about this, actually, because I'm a reader. And for me, all our decisions need to be evidence-based. Policy making should be evidence-based. But what you sometimes see is it's based on feelings or particular ethos, because you could see the rise of how, for example, immigration is necessary in the global world. It's needed. With demographic shifts happening in the next couple of decades, you actually need migrants. There's actually shortages, severe shortages, but the messaging politically is very much, we don't want migrants, we don't want to open our venue, but you actually need it to survive as a country, as financial institutions, as health services. It's actually needed. So I do worry how we're increasingly not utilizing research. There's amazing academic work being done and research, but there's still a bit of a disconnect between academia, academic research, but also policy making. And that needs to be, there's various actually entities and organizations who are trying to bridge this, but still not sufficiently. There needs to be a bit more work on this particular area. And data changes. You cannot learn data from 5-10 years ago to be done on regular basis and regular intervals with fresh eyes, new innovative methodologies of research, because through COVID-19, research methodologies had to evolve significantly to remote. How to do verification also has changed because you can use GPS. So we need to marry a bit of technology as well. But again, I'll come back to the point. There's an apparent lack of leadership. Everyone is scared, wanting to toe the line. I see very few disruptors, which is sad.
It is indeed. Speaking of disruptors or people you admire, do you have anyone that you can point out to, and an organization that you can point out? Someone that you admire, organization that you admire, a disruptor, it may be?
I think there are many. As I said, no one is perfect. I have my faults. Our organization, there's some things you could do better. But I think it's the ethos, what drives people. The fact that you're actually operating in the humanitarian sector as a diaspora or such in itself is commendable, because the amount of, I'm not going to say the language, but the amount of stuff you have to deal with in terms of microaggressions, systemic racism, and you still remain, it speaks volume, because you're like, this shows determination, you want to change. But also those who really kind of take the ethics, so on the advocacy front, like, we have colleagues, amazing, like Victoria Sada at the Jenny, who has been at the forefront. I admire a lot of those who work with mutual aid groups across the globe, who do this on a voluntary basis, taking it. So for me, I'm not going to be naming all the big name. It's actually the local heroes.
That's good. That's good. When I ask people about heroes, I ask real heroes. It doesn't have to be some distant person that you meet.
Everyone usually wants to mention Mandela or, admirable, but end of the day, it's the unrecognized heroes, I think, the most important.
Indeed. If I could grant you one wish that would change the humanitarian field for the better, what would you wish for?
A reset.
Oh, lovely. I like that.
I know, exactly, a reset.
What are you most proud of in your career?
What I'm proud of? I think the amazing people that I had the opportunity to work with and who kind of opened the door or taught me some things as well.
Cool. So I always like to end my episodes with a few questions to know you better. The first one is, what song brings a smile to your face?
Oh, quite cheesy on the music front. So I like a bit more the 70s. So September from
Oh my God.
I know I should have said like a classical or something.
It's now a classic.
Something from Sudan. We have Wardi, who is like really well known, not just in Sudan, but also in neighboring countries, Ethiopia, and Fela Kuti.
Oh,
Yeah.
lovely. If you ever get to catch, there's a Fela Kuti musical, and I got to see it last summer, and it's absolutely a joy to behold. The music is so good.
Oh, okay. I want details, please.
Okay, what is the last show that you binged and loved, or movie that you binged and loved? Well, mostly a show.
I'm just trying to think. I kind of like cooking shows just to kind of watch it. It's like, yes. There's one called The Great British Menu. So that's what I've been watching. A show that I saw was a friend of mine directed it in London. It's an alternative to Rapunzel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I think it was meant to be, she's going to kill me because I can't remember which country it was, but it wasn't based on Southern Africa. And so it was just kind of turning it completely on its head. And it was a really lovely play to see. So
Do you have the name of the play?
yeah, it's called Rapunzel, but I'll send you the details. But it was a short run, but maybe I can persuade her to set it up again.
Send us there, and we'll add it in the notes of the show. And then the last thing, what's one thing on your bucket list?
Oh, what was on my bucket list? So time for family, actually. More time for family because it's been, the last couple of years, it's been relentless. So, yes, if I can have another item, it would be to see parts of the world I haven't had the opportunity to see as yet.
Super. So we grant you, we hope that you take, especially the bucket list with your family. Thank you, Bashair, for your time. This was great.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.